Let's now talk about some Western and non-Western language variations based on language and gender. These variations or these perspectives are based on various studies which were conducted in multiple Western and non-Western contexts. There may not essentially be a certain cultural difference embedded in these findings, but still we could have an insight about Western and non-Western context in relation to their enactment of gender identity in the language use. For example, Locastro highlights an individual variable in female gender living in UK and Australia, and he points out that women usually drop ha sound, which happens to fall at the beginning of the words in which the initial sound is ha. For example, the words like home, house, which include this ha sound in the beginning. Women usually would living in these countries like USA or UK would pronounce UK or Australia would pronounce it as home or house. So whereas in non-Western context, women or even men would pronounce these words completely like home or house. So these are certain perspectives which might lead us to think about the difference of language and gender use in various contexts. If we move forward, we see that in Western context, it's the males who are expected to dominate a mixed gender communication, and they would probably interrupt more, and they would take more turns in their talk, and therefore they're expected to dominate more in a mixed gender conversation. Similarly, females are expected to just make their male counterparts in a conversation excluded from the talk by initiating topics which are of no interest to men. For example, they might start talking about the choice of clothes, personal feelings, or household works, and in this way they practically exclude males or men from their talk. In Western societies, there has been various studies which talk about the use of language and gender, and they also talk not only about the linguistic items which are used differently by these genders, but also about various verbal, various non-verbal or extra linguistic features which are different with both genders. One of this kind is that females in US they have to confront a binary choice between being addressed by either Mrs. or Miss plus their family name, whereas in some of the non-Western contexts, for example in Japan, there are so many honor-related forms of address which are associated with women, and this is just because of a change in cultural setting, because in some Asian settings or some non-Western settings, women are usually treated with more honorable forms of addresses, or we call them honorifics, just to show the politeness in formal context. Even some women themselves would like to be addressed with more honorific or elaborated honorifics, just to show their beauty, grace, social status, or dignity. So this is what we found from various studies in Japanese context. Therefore, that's why some researchers argue that beautification honorifics is a form of gendered language use that, in her view, does not elaborate dominance in Japan. It doesn't show the dominance of female gender over male gender. Rather, it's a kind of language where female beauty or grace is highlighted for other reasons. It has been also observed in Pakistan and India that English is used as a dominant language in elite class, and especially by the women of or females belonging to this class. We could cite here a study by a renowned researcher, Sabiha Mansoor, where she actually found that women would prefer speak English in social settings, especially the educated women studying in an elite institution. They would, which were the sample of her study. They prefer speaking English in social settings just to show that they belong to a certain class, or considering this language as a symbol of being educated. Then we see that Errington states that language is sometimes gender neutral in some of the Asian cultures, and examples of such gender neutral language can be found in the following points. For example, they include a lack of gender marking with articles or morphemes on nouns, specific lexemes like human or person are not marked for feminine or masculine identities. Rather, they are used in a gender neutral way. Similarly, the local greeting is how many older and younger siblings do you have, instead of how many brothers and sisters do you have. We should identify that this is a norm only in some of the Asian or non-Western contexts, but not in all of the Asian or non-Western contexts.